Just going to put my glasses there because sometimes I need my short ones, sometimes I need my long ones. Has anybody here seen me speak before? Felix, you have? No one else? Good, right. Just means I can use the same jokes, and you know you can laugh at appropriate points. Right. My aim today is very simple, twofold. I want to inform you what funding there is out there and what you need to do to get it. As far as I'm concerned, there is loads of funding out there, and it's just, well, you'll see what it's about. You're going to see what it's about here. But before that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I know Patricia did this. She said, I'm a chartered accountant. I am a chartered accountant. I've been a chartered accountant for a long time. I qualified many, many years ago when accountancy firms had proper names rather than letters. The accountancy firm that I was part of is now KPMG, but it had a proper name then. I'm also a Yorkshireman, so I'm from the other side. So forgive me, I know there are, for the Mancunians over here, I'm from the other side. And I've also got Scottish parents, so you can see this sort of financial, mathematical type thing ringing its way through. And I'm also an Everton fan. So it's just, for me, it's just win-win-win. That's just a little bit about me. My views on funding are quite specific, based on, to be honest, 8 years of doing business funding. And the first one is there is loads of funding out there. It's always about putting the right proposal in front of the right funder or funders. Sometimes you'll get it from the first one. 99% of the time you won't. But if you put the right proposal in front of the right funders, in my opinion and in my experience, you will get an offer. Now, whether you like that offer isn't necessarily right or wrong. The fact is you should get an offer. So whether it's you reject it because the debt, the price of the debt is too much, the interest is too much, or whether it's because the security they require is too much, or on equity, whether they want too much of a share of your business. That doesn't mean to say you haven't got an offer, it just means to say that you don't like it. And the second thing is, and I made a comment about this at the last event 2 weeks ago, so for those, I don't know how many were here 2 weeks ago, but I made a comment about when you're pitching to investors, not thinking it's not a marriage, you're just trying to get another date. And I see myself very much like a dating agency, and funding is like dating. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put people here who need money together with people here who've got money. And sometimes that's an individual, sometimes that's it could be a loan fund, it could be a bank, it could be a government fund. There's loads of different methods of funding your business. But ultimately, you've got someone who wants funding and somebody who's got funding. And what I try and do is put them together. But also, I think, I use this dating analogy a huge amount, so forgive me for it. But it's just because it seems to work. I find that if you're looking for a date, you're trying to put yourself forward in the best possible light. You know, you're talking about the things that you've got that are good. But the other side is, you're not just looking for anyone. You're not looking for anybody to fund your business. You've got to look for someone who's right for you, just like you find someone who's right for you on a dating purpose. So, lots of funding out there. You've got to put yourself, think of it as a date. You're looking to get a date with someone who thinks and wants to work the way you do. So, types of funding. There are only really 3 sorts of funding, as far as I'm concerned. Debt. And debt is where you get money from somebody and you pay it back with interest. And that's it. It's as simple as that. I'm going to go through every sort of debt that I can think of. I'm going to go through lots of equity. I'm going to go through lots of grants. It is going to be very listy, this, I'm afraid. But nevertheless, that's what it's going to be. But there is loads of debt out there. And it includes everything like loans. It includes overdrafts. It includes invoice finance, asset finance, etc., etc., etc. But ultimately, you pay back debt with interest. Equity. I hate it when people say, oh, I gave away a share of my business. You don't give away. You sell a share of your business. And so equity is very much like Dragon's Den. So for those who watch Dragon's Den, you'll see they come on, they pitch. Sometimes they pitch well, sometimes they don't pitch so well. And they say, I want £50,000 and I want to give away 20% of my business, or I want to sell 20% of my business. So ultimately, the funder gets a share of your business so that they then share in future dividends and potentially, in fact, almost always, future sale of that business, because they hope that their value of their shares will have increased. And the other sort is, so that the top one is where you pay it back with interest. The second one is where you ultimately, the investor gets their money back times, hopefully, a multiple. And the third one is grants. And I've got to be honest, I don't really work much in the grant field. It's hard, it takes a long time, it's very paperwork heavy. But if you've got the time and the energy to do it, then I don't say don't do it. I just say you need to think about exactly what you do. But generally you have to do something. So it's not like a free grant. I get asked almost every day, Graham, is there any free money out there? And
Is there any free money?
See, every day. And yes, there is some free money out there, but it's generally linked to doing something for it, such as jobs. So you may have to create jobs in order to get that grant, or you may have to do some research and development. So I'm not anti-grant, I'm just saying you need to think a lot about it. And I was involved in a grant, which I'm desperately trying to remember the name of it, but it was launched something like November the 1st, 2015, or maybe 2014. And it was in the digital creative, it was a digital and creative grant. And they announced the winner in something like the September the following year. Well, for digital and creatives, that's just like a lifetime. So I'm not saying don't do it, just think about it. Right. Ways to fund your business. I'm going to start right at the beginning, and hopefully I'm going to go through as many things as I can. I don't know the sort of stage of the audience in terms of where you're up to, so forgive me if some of this you may be way past some of this early stuff, but nevertheless I think it's right to do it. I'm going to start with debt, I'm then going to go to equity, and then I'm going to go to grants. Okay? It is not every single element of debt that there is. It's not every single supplier of equity it is, because to be honest, we'll be here for days. But it's the things that I tend to work with, the things that are very Northwest based, and hopefully it'll give you something to go away and look at. So, this is what I did. When I set up, I just did it from my own savings. But with the best will in the world, you're going to be limited. Well, unless you're rich, or you've got rich, well, no, I'll come on to that. Unless you're rich personally, then you're never going to get too far. Family and friends. I was going to say rich parents before, you see, because that's where that comes from. My issue with this is it's fine. I personally didn't borrow or get any money off my family or friends, but I know loads of people who do. My advice is if they're prepared to do it, that's fine, but just remember there comes a payback time, and sometimes those family don't like you anymore, and they don't invite you places, to weddings and Christmas and things like that, because they wanted their money back, and you said that you were going to make a fortune, and you said you were going to pay them back 3 times what they put in. And friends, I think friends are worse actually, because family sort of tend to forgive you because it's like inheritance. But friends, no, they want their money back, so you can lose your friends. So I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying be wary of it. I funded my business when I set up on my own 10, 12, 13 years ago, with the top one. I took a deal from a business I was with, got some money out of them, and then put everything else on credit cards. 0% credit cards. I was paying 0%. It was great. Racked up a load of credit card debt. But fortunately, my business, the first business I set up, went quite well. But nevertheless, really importantly, once those 0%s finish, and at those times, you didn't even have to pay a transfer fee when you're moving from one credit card to another. Now, there's transfer fees, I don't know, 2-3%. So it's not that bad. But obviously, if you do get into having to pay 20-odd% credit card rates, it's an expensive way to fund your business. So, and the other thing is, you're personally liable. I don't know how you're set up in terms of your company, but basically you're either a sole trader, a partnership, or a limited company. If you take out a credit card, you're personally liable yourself. It's not a debt on the business, it's a debt on you personally. So I'm not saying that's right or wrong, it's just that's what it is. Looking around the room at the ages for the next one. There is still some money in the Prince's Trust, but you do have to be 18 to 30. So for those people that are over 30, I'm sorry, you can't. They've got a little bit, just missed it, Patricia. Just missed it, yeah. It's limited funding, there isn't a lot. The rate's about 6.2%, and there are, in certain circumstances, you can get a grant. Now, this is one of these things, I think, well, if you've got the time, apply for it. But be wary, you might not get it, and it's not a lot of money. The other early stage way to fund your business is this thing called a startup loan. A startup loan was started by the coalition government before this one, or before, depending on which government we're talking about, whenever it was, about 2010, 2011. It was fronted by James Caan, who used to be on Dragon's Den. And you can borrow, as an individual in your business, up to £25,000. And in fact, if you're in business with someone else, so say you both own the business, each of you can borrow £25,000 for that business. But really importantly, it is not the business borrowing, it's you borrowing. So you, again, are personally liable for that debt. And people say, oh, I don't want to do that. But then if you were to get a loan from the bank, if you were to borrow 25 grand from a bank into your business, they'd make you personally guarantee it. So it's the same sort of thing. The rate is only 6%, I say only, can't say only, can I? The rate is 6%, that's just a fact. But they will allow you to have what they call capital repayment holidays, where you only pay back the interest. So in the early days when you're setting up your business, it's not a bad method of funding your business. I wouldn't say it's easy to get, but it's not that difficult. You have to do a business plan, you have to do a cash flow forecast. And in Manchester, it's run by an organisation, and I'll talk about this organisation a few times, called Business Finance Solutions. Business Finance Solutions are based in Churchgate House on Oxford Road. And they have different people for different funds. There are 3 different funds I'm going to talk about here. But the startup, they look after the startup loan. Basically, the government don't run anything really. They farm out this startup loan fund to various people around the place. And in Manchester, it's BFS, Business Finance Solutions. So you can borrow up to 25 grand. So if you had 3 people in your business, you could each borrow 25 grand, 75 grand. So it's not bad. And when I say people in the business, it's key people. It's people with a certain amount of authority, interest in the business. So if you employed a janitor, no disrespect to janitors, says he really quickly, but if they're not really involved in the workings of the business, you can't just make everybody borrow. So that's startup loan. So that's quite early stage funding of businesses. Who else is lending? The banks. I've got a slide on banks because banks get a bad name. And I'm going to talk about why they've got a bad name and why maybe you shouldn't think of them as such a bad name. But banks generally have 2 products. They have loans and overdrafts. Loans, where you borrow a certain amount of money and you pay it back over a period of time. Or overdrafts, where you create an overdraft limit. So let's just say it's 10 grand. And then you can dip in and out of that 10 grand as you go along. And you generally pay what's called an arrangement fee for the overdraft, which varies depending on how much the overdraft is. And then you pay a interest charge on the amount that you borrow. So if you go you go 5 grand into your overdraft, you'll pay interest on that 5 grand. If you don't go into your overdraft, you don't pay anything. So overdrafts are quite good, particularly with early stages where you've got a business and you're going in and out and you get sales and then you have a bad period and then you get some more sales. So whereas if you borrow the money at the start, you've got to pay interest on the total over the length of that time. So overdrafts are good in certain circumstances. I mentioned Business Finance Solutions. I'm mentioning them again. Depending on where you are in wherever it is you live and work, I would have a look at your local council just to see what they do. Because sometimes councils, they put stuff on their website and then they just expect you to know it's there. They don't advertise it. Anyway, other regional funders, depending on where you live, because I don't obviously know where you guys are all set up. In Liverpool, they have a thing called MSIF, which stands for Merseyside Special Investment Fund. And they've been around for probably since Heseltine decided he was going to save Liverpool. Loads of money, and they do invest. They run a loan fund, they run some equity funds, so that's MSIF. But you've got to be you really have to be in Liverpool. They will invest in people just outside in places like Skelmersdale and that if they think people from Liverpool are going to go and work in that area. But you don't tend to get MSIF investing in Manchester. It just doesn't go down that well for all sorts of reasons. But they have a loan fund up to 100 grand. Rosebud is Lancashire. So again, forgive me, I don't know where you will all come from, but if you are then outside, so Skelmersdale, Burnley, Blackburn, Rosendale, etc., and you're in Lancashire, then you can go for the Rosebud fund. That's up to 100 grand. They have a micro fund that goes up to 10, and then this bigger fund that goes up to, in fact, it goes more than 100. But anyway, it's at least 100. And in Cheshire, which is Cheshire West, what's called Cheshire West, Cheshire East, and Warrington, they have a 25 grand fund. Not as good. for some reason, Cheshire East, Cheshire West and Warrington don't seem to get on. They don't work together. They tend to argue with each other. Whereas Greater Manchester, they just sort themselves out. And then the other loan fund that is very specific to Greater Manchester, so even though you've got this one, you've also got this one. So this is what's called Maven Capital. They have another fund, which I'll talk about later, and they run the Greater Manchester Loan Fund. So that's the Manchester Loan Fund, that's the Greater Manchester Loan Fund. And that takes over where that one stops. So you generally have to be trading for that one. You know, they're not going to lend you 100 grand loan on a speculative thing, unless perhaps you've been with another business and you're taking a team with you and you're creating another company and setting it up almost exactly the same. It would be hard to get something out of them for that. But nevertheless, they've got that fund. Sorry, yes?
Is any of that money Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund money, or is that separate again?
That's separate again, the new sheet, different slide. Yeah, so that is the Greater, so Maven have got the Greater Manchester Loan Fund just for Greater Manchester.